bamboo structures and was a pioneer electrically to help us measure and prove by measurement the correlation between improved seed growth and plant growth inside bamboo or living architecture versus steel and concrete. He made the measurements and built the structures, so he's very electrically competent as well as a biologic architect. So thank you, Juan, for being with us. Go ahead, Juan, you're on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan, for bringing me here. So I don't know, for me to be here tonight, well, this morning for you guys, this evening or afternoon, my end. I would have loved to be there and meet all of you and have the chance to actually exchange ideas and information. But you know, as Dan said, I didn't have the possibility to travel all the way there to France. So here I am in Bali. I'm actually from Spain, and my father is Austrian. And I live most of the time here in Bali, where I also work, and we have our office here and in other places where we work on biological architecture and design. So I would like to share with you today some of the work we've been doing, and as Dan mentioned, we're pioneering some of the measurements that we did already a few years ago, and we like, well, I would like also to show you more experiments today we've been doing, and also we would like to talk a little bit about the science. We don't have a lot of time, so I will try to be brief. So biological architecture is it's a very broad sort of science, no? Like, is this, I love this documentaries called Magical Egypt series, and they talk about like the science of temple design, right? And I think bioarchitecture is very much that. It's like the science of the ancient science of creating temples, creating sacred structures. So we're trying to define scientifically how that works. So as in counterposition to modern sciences, which are very specialized in many ways, and bioarchitecture, I think a bioarchitect needs to be a very broad sort of interdisciplinary field of knowledge, you know, that you have to have in order to be able to be a bioarchitect. You cannot just be an architect. You have to understand other fields of sciences in a very interesting way. Also, like Vastu actually is a very broad sort of science of manifestation that then is applied to the design of buildings. So this is, in my mind, what bioarchitecture is about. So, by the way, so in between the slides, I'm going to be putting designs that we are making. So these are just going to come in between slides so you guys can see some of the design work that we have been doing. So we always like to start these presentations talking about the pioneering work of Philip Callahan, which is who started this idea of measuring, spectrum analyzing the weak electric field.
Phil is the one who taught us originally how to measure trees. Your voice cut out.
Architecture of his, right. And
go ahead.
Right, so
go ahead.
So in his work, and this is something that Dan and Patrick took to a whole another new level. In his work, in his initial work, essentially what he was doing was spectrum analyzing the weak electric field of trees. So he was able to diagnose if a tree was actually healthy or diseased if you could find a specific harmonic signature. That harmonic signature tends to be the Schumann harmonic cascade. So he had the intuition that buildings might do the same thing that trees do. So this is in a way a form of biomimicry. So he tested a house in Wales in the UK where people were living a very long time. So these houses were made of hemp and clay, I believe. So this is a really high dielectric material. So when he stick his spectrum analyzer, he measured the spectrum, the electrical spectrum of the house, he found out that the same harmonic signature was in the tree. So what he found was the Schumann harmonic cascade in the house. So he deducted that the reason why people live so long in these houses is because this Schumann harmonics, the earth frequency, is actually very present in the architectural environment inside the space.
So a sacred house is a sacred tree.
Right, it's in a way energetic biomimicry. We mimicking nature, mimicking trees. And in fact, houses and structures are doing this. I mean, they actually can work in a constructive way, storing these frequencies, or they can also work in a destructive way and actually bleeding or leaking these frequencies. So briefly, the main principle here is the building acting as a capacitor. Exactly. So as a tree, a building sits in between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere. So the ionosphere, as we see here, is positively charged, and then the Earth is negatively charged. So any structure that we place in between this electrical potential will act as a capacitor, therefore will, as in a capacitor, store an electrical charge.
And the high dielectric makes the capacitor efficient, natural material.
Like, is wood also considered?
Yes, wood would be hardwood. Anything that grew up biologically, the molecules are tended to be arranged more fractally, making high dielectric, which simply means charge distribution efficiency. Juan, we lost you for a second. Are you still there?
I'm still here. Yeah, I'm listening.
Well, go ahead, please. You're doing great. Yep.
So yeah, here we can see some graphics. This is something that Dan just mentioned, right? It's like, this is the difference in between air, I believe, and then this is basically a material that has the ability to become polarized like a high dielectric. And then so it's able to store that capacitance versus something like steel or metal that will essentially just bleed the capacitance, therefore wouldn't be able to act as a capacitor that they will be able to provide these effects.
That's right. And so the building needs to breathe the charge of your aura, and steel will absolutely prevent. High dielectric means it's breathing your aura, so you literally inhabit the space.
Right, so that's just a little introduction, so we can understand also what the measurements that we did and the study that we did mean within this context. So this was a study that we did many years ago. Dan called me in and asked me to help him to develop and do the beta testing for this software that is now called the Flame in the Mind. And then so I helped him by providing him with data that he could then use to do the testing of the software and then be able to fine-tune the entire system. And then so I was already playing with measurements, doing seed germination. I had the BioWell, the Sputnik that you see up here. I was also looking at biogeometry, and so we basically decided to test around 11 different buildings, and then not just do a spectrum analysis, but also try to cross reference different measurements in order to get a much clearer picture of what may be happening inside the buildings.
And just to say, Juan, that the Sputnik I discussed with Korotkov, and it's basically simply a capacitor, and it's measuring, in this case, the efficiency of charge radiance, which is the fractality of the aura. So basically, if charge is able to distribute, the Sputnik will show that in a Curlian kind of picture. And Korotkov totally agreed that our concept of harmonic analysis, looking for harmonic inclusiveness, was perfectly parallel to his idea of displaying charge radiance efficiency capacitively. So the concept of fractality in air that Korotkov pioneered is perfectly parallel to harmonic inclusiveness in the aura. Thank you, Juan.
Right. So let's go into the measurements that we did. We actually selected an only few number of places because the entire study was too big to show in this lecture and many other lectures. So we just show what we consider the most most meaningful, results. So you will see how we have the next slides. In each one of these positions, the different measurements will come up, including the building that we measured. So here we have this house. This is a regular concrete structure, most likely reinforced with steel. This is the spectrum analysis. That's the seed germination, and this is the Sputnik measurement that we took. So this is in the GDB. We will see that this is kind of the control group, the lowest of the measurements, so we can understand how the other ones, it's basically a reference point. So this is where we say the lowest of all of them, and then so this is also in a way also one of the lowest ones because it's also very similar as we can see, and then here we have these graphs that also come up from the GDB, and this is the seed germination experiment, and this is the spectrum analysis. So we can see that it's not many harmonics, and it's quite pretty much the same than the previous building. So these are two conventional, modern, standard built concrete steel architecture. Unfortunately, this is the standard of building of our time. And now we can see how the difference that will be in between a concrete building and one of the structures that we have built here in Bali, which is in this case a bamboo dome made of biological materials. And we can see how there is more harmonics, more human harmonics present. There's actually less electromagnetic pollution. The seed germination experiment came out to be bigger, and also the GDB is telling us that there is more energy. Here we have already like from 900 all the way to 4,000, something like that. So there's a significant more energy within the space. And then we can keep going. This is also one of our structures, a bamboo dome, that is also a pentagram. And this is radically different, as you can see, like there is a lot more harmonics in here. It's also a little difficult sometimes to take these measurements because there is a lot of noise, electrosmog. So we have to make sure that we always switch off the electricity from the main and make sure there is minimal electromagnetic pollution. The GDB is actually like, substantially like way higher than this. This is like 5,700 joules versus 400. So then we have the seed germination experiment. You can see here, for example, the root development, how these roots were actually way more developed than conventional building, and also the grass here. And then so here we put them all together. And we're actually missing this one. I didn't put it in because it's just another concrete structure. So we only look at 4 different buildings. But here you can see specifically the seed germination experiment. This is to scale, as you can see here in the meter. And then so look at the difference in between these seeds versus that seeds. Also the weight, so the relationship, and the root development.
The top 2 are biologic, right?
Correct, yeah. Those are the two are the biological architecture design and buildings, and these 3 are the concrete structures. So this paper is also on Biologic website, and you can be downloaded, and it's like, I think, 80 pages, and it's all laid down. We don't do any claims, we just put down the results, and we hope somebody will continue this research and actually do a proper study, because this is just an initial assessment. I think universities should engage with this kind of work.
That's right.
And really do like systematic
Yep.
testing and really prove these ideas. But as you can see, there is a definite pattern here that tells you something about the different energetic properties of a structure and how they actually increase seed germination and life in general. So to continue with the science, I think it is kind of obvious that there is this idea of atmospheric electricity. There is this book called the Brill Compendium, which there is multiple patents which talk about this idea of atmospheric electricity. So this electrical potential is very real, and there is actually patents that have been used to not just create healing effects within architectural spaces, but there's actually a technology to harness electricity. So, and these are basically it's plasma, it's high voltage electricity.
And
the higher you go, the greater the potential.
And the fact that it was called Vril, we think Vril is a less technically correct term than coherent longitudinal. So Vril, in fact, is naming this longitudinal principle. Beautiful egg shape.
So here we have, for example, the concept of electroculture. So in electroculture, it's well known that by using different types of antennas, etc., you can also sort of inject this Brill, this longitudinal EMF into the soil, and then therefore create enhanced growth. So in a way, it's like if we can do this with electroculture, we can do it with buildings.
They say
in the other
makes your carrots.
In the other hand, what conventional buildings are doing is entirely the opposite to electroculture is doing. It's actually like destroying the capacity field of the building by the various methods that they use to build modern structures. So we have here an experiment that I think is very illustrative of explaining this concept of atmospheric electricity, which is an experiment that you can find and multiple people have done on the internet. And it's you basically take a drone and then you connect an antenna, you send it up into the atmosphere, and then there's a cable that comes down from the drone while you're connected to this electrostatic motor, and then the other terminal goes into the ground, so it's ground to the earth. And then when you throw the dome up into the air, you basically end up creating an electrostatic charge that then runs that motor. So I think this is very meaningful to understand what buildings are doing, tapping into that electrical potential, and the same way the trees do. And as we can see, there is many ancient structures that in some way they were using this principle. So this will be the anode, and then the cathode, they could be on the bottom, and then the electric material is all that stone material. So here we have more of our designs. So we just went ahead and actually performed this experiment because I love to do experiments and really understand what's happening. This actually happened yesterday. So we only flew up 50 meters high. And instead of just running an electrostatic motor, we put a flame in the mine in there, in the middle of the two plates of the capacitor. Wow. So instead of running an electrostatic motor, we have two plates. We have the positive plate that connects to the drone, and then we have the negative plate that connects to the earth. So that's where the flame in the mine goes. You guys can see the drone here, the ground in. This is the plate. The positive plate and the negative plate. And this is the antenna. So as you've seen in the last slide, a point, in the same way that the Tesla coil put up it will discharge through a point, the charge will also collect through the point. So the more points you put into the antenna, the more electrons they're actually able to be collected through each one of the tips of that antenna. If you actually think about a tree, the leaf of a tree, especially pines, is very similar to this antenna that we have here. So that kind of tells you something that what trees are doing. So we performed this experiment, and now you guys are going to see what's happening in real time in spectrum analysis. And this is us here performing the experiment. We're in Bali, so it's a little bit, you know, we just use whatever we have in hand. We're not funded, so we just do whatever we can to do the best work. But so you can see the spectrum analysis. This is where you measure. There's no, you know, there's not much going on. Then the drone goes up and it's pulling up the cable. Mostly we can see noise here. And then the drone is up into the sky. Then I'm gonna connect now the positive plate of the capacitor. I wire up, and now watch the flame in the mind spectrum analysis doing what it's going to do. Wow. We have a little bit of noise because this is very sensitive to movement and air. That's one of the reasons why all of that is covered with a piece of cloth. We have to make sure that the air doesn't move so much, so because then it will create noise. And now, 15 meters up into the atmosphere, you can see those harmonics building up. So we essentially, they will always build up. I mean, in these experiments that already have been performed, we always will have a build-up of an electrical potential in between those two plates. The idea was to spectrum analyze that electrical potential and then see what kind of frequencies we could find in there. But to be honest with you, I think there is a little bit of noise there. So that wire could be acting also as a monopole antenna that is picking up noise. We don't know exactly. We will have to perform this more experiments.
But that dominant, the dominant peak is 50 and 100 hertz. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And is that house nearby on 50 hertz, I suppose?
Most likely. This is what I thought, Dan. This is probably the wire acting as a... So there is two conclusions here, like I think are very interesting. One thing is like probably rebar inside buildings is acting like that cable, 50 meters high, and it's picking up on all the electric smog. So that's what rebar do in buildings. They pick up noise. They pick up electromagnetic pollution, and then all of that is resonated inside of your space, making the building more more detrimental for your health.
But if you did
in a way,
sorry, if you did this far enough from buildings into real deep nature, you should get amplified Schumann, wouldn't you think?
That's what I thought. That's what I thought that we were going to find, Dan. But I realized that there is always this huge amount of electrosmog everywhere, and then it's hard to find what you actually measure. And in a way, a building wouldn't be like that. In a building, the wire wouldn't go all the way up into the roof. The building, the entire thing is actually made of dielectric material. So in the case of this experiment, I think we will have to perform that in a place where there is no electrosmog. And then we will most likely be able to find the harmonic inclusiveness of the Schumann. That was the idea. And I think in that measurement is all mixed up. So it's telling us different things, but it is just an experiment, and we can conclude different things. But this is sort of my initial findings, and and this
Juan, we had a question here. Did you quickie?
So with using the drone and the tablet and the technology to use the GPS and the satellites and everything that are connected, you're always going to get that interference in the recording. So you'll have to get a base of what is coming out of the equipment so you can extract that.
So she's wondering also whether the drone itself was part of the electrosmog. Be interesting to find out what electronics are in the drone too. A good point, perhaps. Yeah.
I thought about that as well. But in that scenario, when the drone comes down, you should see the same harmonics in there.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, you should be able to track the arrival of lightning storms and all kinds of fun stuff if you got pristine data. Very interesting.
Please continue, Juan. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll love to do more experiments and actually share this. That I think is just there's a lot to find out. For sure, what trees do is they tap into the Schumann harmonics, and we have seen those harmonics being measured on trees in a really clean way. So they actually somehow don't pick up so much into the electrosmog like.
Yeah, although so we have seen trees die from electrosmog too. But we had one more quick question.
Yeah, I was just wondering why is it outside of the house, not inside, using the physical space to conduct the wire inside of the house?
If you tried it inside the house?
Yeah.
Well, see, the problem is if the main power supply were turned off in that house, we think that 50 and 100 hertz would go away. Whether you're inside or near outside, either way, it messes up the neighborhood, unfortunately. That's what we think. Yeah. Yeah.
So in a building where there's an antenna on top of a building, how does the antenna that picks the atmospheric static electricity terminate into the building? Like where does that, is there a wire that comes to the roof and ends there, or is the wire running through the building to the base of the building? How does it terminate? Yeah,
usually, I mean, if it's radio, it'll be connected to the electronics in the building, but then there will be a safety ground or lightning protection, for example. But, thank you. But either way, the problem is this is mostly amplifying pollution and not nature, unless, so that's the drama. But please, Juan, maybe you continue, sorry. We have about...
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting. Actually, when we come down to trees are sort of organ accumulators. They're like asymmetric capacitors. That most likely they have some kind of electrogravitic effect. So they actually use this atmospheric charge to transport water up through
implosively
through its trunk.
It's an implosive suction. Yep.
Yeah, probably trees actually when are not connected, when there is a lot of electromagnetic pollution and they don't cannot perform this function, they can become dehydrated. They are not able to actually absorb the water. I mean, Schlosser talks a lot about this, like a real forest versus like a plantation forest, or places where there is not real a real ecosystem. In fact, those trees work in a very different way, like a natural tree. So we can actually see those harmonics in trees. And so here we can see another experiment where actually we did the same thing, but now the antenna is actually in the top of the building, and the cable actually goes into the ground, which is the longest one, which could pick up some of the electrosmog. It's actually a coaxial cable. So you have aluminum shielding that then is connected into the ground. So I'm preventing some of that electrosmog to come through the system. And then I'm putting here the two plates of the capacitor, and then here you have a high dielectric silk, raw silk, that then the flame in the mine is connected to that. And then we have the same type of antenna. So this was actually a biological experiment. I wanted to see what was going to happen to my body when I was meditating in between the two plates. So I'm basically sitting on one of the plates and the other one is on top of my head. So I'm a meditator. I meditated for around 2 hours. And after 2 hours, I took the flame in the mind, put it on my head, and then put some music, which really helps sometimes, and just go into a very deep meditation and then experience some really deep bliss. So in this case, I use the flame in the mind, the part of the device that is used to measure brain waves. So this is essentially what was happened to my brain when I was having this meditation. So I always say that what's happening here is that I'm like inside of a very sacred temple where a lot of this charge is highly available all around me on the surrounding. And then like Dan says, when you start to have these experiences of bliss, you begin to implode and then you begin to attract charge. And then, so all my hair was standing up and I was having a profound bliss experience.
That's high alpha. The green is alpha. It's gorgeous. High alpha.
That's alpha was huge, yeah. And I should have turned down the gain a little bit to actually see what's happening. But
off the
you guys get an idea of what a sacred biologically architect space could to facilitate to the people who live in the spaces. for meditation, but you also want to sleep there. You want to live there. You want to have, you know, it's like being next to a forest. I mean, probably there's a reason why Buddha became enlightened next to a tree.
Right.
So
That was beautiful. Really beautiful, Juan. Good work.
thank you. So another measurement, and here we have a little bit of a different picture. I think you can see here more the Schumann harmonics, but the same thing happens. Is that in a way there is always some electric smoke that is present. When you connect the plates, those Schumann harmonics are more present. But I mean, there is a lot of work to do in this, and unfortunately, there's not that many people doing this kind of stuff. I love to see other people doing the same studies, and then be able to talk to them and see what they find. So this is another very interesting measurement that we did, which this is in Shambhala. This is one of our projects. We did a design work. Unfortunately, it never really took off because it was a very complicated project. There's these unbelievably beautiful islands in Indonesia, in this remote area where there is this pristine life, marine life. This is an ecological reserve, and we're proposed to build like a highly sustainable architecture in these islands where we could just develop 1% of the land. And the land mass of this project was like the size of Singapore. It was huge. It was actually a land from the government. But anyway, this place doesn't have electricity. There is no electrical system being installed in these islands. We have this gorgeous tree here. And then so we put the flame in the mine, and here you can have where you can see where you have no electromagnetic pollution whatsoever. I mean, you can feel this place when you are inside of these islands. Your nervous system is relaxed. You can actually think more clearly, and you are more aware just because you are in such a pristine environment. And this is a very clear measurement that we have of what's happening in that tree. So that tree is collecting this capacitive charge from the atmosphere, and it's resonating the Schumann beautifully.
That's real nature. Quick question.
Well, what it is when you are doing your grounding rod, especially if you are anywhere in the area of AC ground rod, there is transient that goes through the ground, and if you have a very conductive environment in the ground plane, then you can't get away from that.
They call it stray ground current, exactly.
Yes.
In other words, you need to be quite a ways from electrosmog. Thank you. Yes, stray ground current. Thank you. And that also can mess with the cows.
Yes.
Go ahead, Juan. Go ahead, Juan.
So we like to finish with this slide. Always I think it's very meaningful, and the way I came across this information just reading this book of the Dimensions of Paradise by John Michel. And then so he talks about sacred geometry and science and the heavenly order of Earth. So there is this paragraph here that basically is saying there are two forms of natural energy we're involved, one terrestrial, the other one from the atmosphere. Through the ritual fusion of these two elements, a spirit was generated and spread like an enchantment from the temple, bearing fertility to the surrounding countryside and pervading it with an atmosphere of peace and happiness.
Beautiful.
In terms of spiritual technology, might have involved the fertilizing of the earth spirit by the positively charged energy channeled through the lighting rods from the temple roof. The Old Testament chronicles tell of a life-giving streams that rose beneath the temple and flowed towards the four corners of the earth.
That's so. We should credit also, thank you, that John Michel is the one who did that work on the geometry of sacred dimensioning, the megalithic yard, the Roman pace versus the meter and the foot. He did that geometric analysis originally. John was a hero. He did a Sufi dance on my farm, but I think he proved to Roger that he could drink more whiskey than Roger would ever.
If it's Bayes conjugate, you know, it makes it go
Yeah,
down.
I don't know if it's Bayes
No
conjugate,
hangover.
but he's no longer with us. So, a quick question. Go ahead. Quick
Yeah,
question.
it seems to be that there was a time that only like the
We believe the liquid mercury in the pyramids or in the Nazi bell act as a lens for the longitudinal, and also made it more conductive. So, and then the liquid mercury was iron powder doped to red mercury. And then they actually introduced a small amount of radioactivity in the mercury vortex, which makes it quasi-superconductive, like the Paul Brown nuclear battery. But that's another question later.
That's what they see with the Tartanian Empire.
Yes, the
right, with
Tartans, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have another question. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to comment to that. The Tartarian architecture, I mean, there's so many people talking about that. They are harnessing atmospheric electricity.
Nice.
In many ways. And then you can see like some of the things they are doing is maybe what you can see here. It's like they don't only have like one dielectric terminal, but they also have like different materials. Sometimes like a sandwich, sort of like capacitive and dielectric materials coming together.
Nice.
And then so you can create some much more complex like electrical engineering of this atmospheric electricity and the Schumann harmonics in order to amplify and harmonize these energies.
Exactly.
They could be used for healing and for creating an ambience of like extraordinary sort of like
Yes.
Healing and consciousness enhancing properties. So that was, I think, highly developed by this Tartarian civilization. If it was real, which I think there is some truth to all that story, where there is also many misinformation there, I believe too. But anyway,
the key principle is gorgeous. Thank you, Juan. Just that, the thin film gold dome, for example, the stupa, these were all designable capacitors. And then in the modern age, you have the tragedy, they're building stupas with steel rebar.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh shit, because they don't have a clue, actually. But the thin film dome was amazing, and the gold dome was like, anyway, one quick question. Go ahead.
Did you consider geomancy in your measurements?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, in the measurements specifically?
Yeah.
That's an interesting suggestion, actually, like take some of the measurements. We definitely design taking in consideration geomancy.
Yes.
We have one of our consultants is a geobiologist, and he uses the leisure antenna and also like earth magnetometers and a whole bunch of, and I work with different consultants doing this, even if I am a dowser myself to some extent, but I prefer to outsource this so I can have a much more like non-bias kind of opinion on how things are done. So I sourced it with someone who has 25 years of experience using this. So they are an expert geobiologist. And so when we do the master planning, we definitely, one of the first sort of constraints of the design for bioarchitecture is the geomancy.
Yes. And the
but doing the measurements will be interesting.
The theory would be that if you are at a place where magnetic lines cross, where it's already been proven telepathy is more available and nuclear critical mass is reduced, like a sacred site, the longitudinal node is far more available, thus charge distribution.
You get
so
the vortex.
Everything works better there. Therapy, telepathy, healing, anything works better where the magnetic lines cross because of the compression effect. That's it. Wait, we have questions. Was your first or who?
Yeah, sorry. Just electrical components within the house and what voltages did you use?
Say again?
The electrical components in the house, in his houses.
Oh, well, are you, in other words, is he attending to where the electrical components go to reduce electrosmog?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we take that into account. We try to minimize the electrosmog.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we, for example, will do will be create the light system only work with 12 volts.
And relays sometimes, yeah.
And then those wires can also be shielded and grounded. So it has like a coaxial cable that have a shielding on the outside, and then it's grounded. And then also avoid the corners, right? The moment that you have a corner, that's where you get the most of the
right angles
problems.
make messes. Yep. Thank
the
you.
90-degree angle on the corner. So you can avoid that in many ways. And also, I think there's a huge problem when you actually surround the entire space with the wire. So if you create a loop, it's almost like you're inside of the coil.
Yeah,
it's very hard to get away from that. So if you can, the way you design the electrical installation, you avoid certain electrical configurations in order to minimize the EMF.
Avoid the loop, avoid the right angles. Beautifully put, Juan. Super. Thank you. Another quick question. Go ahead.
So you've been working with the tree archetype, and I wonder if you've worked with the lotus, because the blueprint in the Egyptian temples is like a pillar with a lotus on top.
A pillar with a
and
lotus
that's
on top in Egypt. Yeah.
So I wonder if the drone experiment can be attuned to that archetype in terms of just getting the wires in an actually built structure and having the plate on top.
The lotus.
conduction of
Well,
the lotus.
I'm kind of
Yeah.
laughing because Juan's huge project in India is a lotus.
Yeah,
Because the
here we
lotus
go.
has
Then
the
this is
skull, and then a
this
plate,
is
and
the
then-
temple that is being built right now.
Yes.
And then, so we're actually just doing some of the things that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
But you can use the lotus
Each one of those petals is in a way like an atmospheric collector of
Yes.
the atmospheric electricity, and then there is all these grounding antennas, and then all that charge is collected and brought into the center of the dome.
But it's beautiful. It's so fabulous, and I've seen
Where does
friends.
the material-
But the lady is mentioning. Sorry.
Dahlia.
Dahlia, I should,
Yeah.
sorry. Dahlia is mentioning also the Egyptian tradition is there's also a pillar under the lotus.
Yep,
Right.
exactly.
It's
Or
a-
you can put your copper wires inside.
Something in the, yeah,
And then make it higher.
make it higher, which is also kind of the Jed Tower, raising the Jed idea, the Jedi.
Yeah, and having it on like a pattern where it carries the
In-
temple, the building.
Yes,
So-
into the array.
Into the array.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Space with,
So it's outside, but it's connected.
space with longitudinal nodes. Sorry, Juan. So, but, you know, spacing these things in an array with longitudinal nodes and the Jed Tower projection. Anyway, we're having fun here. What do you think, Juan?
I'm interested.
Some great ideas coming through. Yeah,
Oh,
definitely. I mean, we are experimenting in many ways, but yeah, we're trying to innovate
Yeah. And
in many ways, bringing
Roger's-
the science forward.
Roger's asking again, where is this fabulous building again?
This is in India, in close to Mumbai.
Close to Mumbai.
Forgive me, I forgot the exact location, but
There-
in that area of India.
there were-
And it's being built right now.
It's being built. There were news headlines about this, and there are films of this construction at bioarchitects.net, which is where we also feature Juan. Another quick question.
Yeah, quick question. So if you
Yeah.
were to build a space like this in a heavily populated area like, say, Central Texas, how far do you need to get away from the city?
So her question was, you know, if you were in a city area, like she's in Texas, how far away from the city do you need to be in order to
Get away from the electricity.
to make the magic and get away from the electrosmog? I imagine that's subjective depending on a lot of factors, but what do you think, Juan?
I mean, it's kind of, unfortunately, like, you know, all of this is pretty ignored by the architectural
Yeah.
world, and they do not understand pretty much anything about this stuff. And it's, you know, it's just, there have to be a total reformation of the,
Of the
you know,
architecture?
the same, I always say, like, and I mentioned this in other lectures with Dan, like, in the same way that there is building regulations that appeal for safety and, you know, this should be one of the safety concerns for architecture, like, you know, what is the biological architecture design approach, and how a building could be made more beneficial for the people that live in them. So you see, it's like, I mean, it happens in all the fields of science. No, it's like we have gone through the rabbit hole of such an extreme materialism that we have forgotten to see what's the unseen,
So
the silent energy that resides within the building. And then so we only look at a building like a material thing that just have to make sense, and it has to be buildable and functional, and, you know, all modern architecture movements of rationalism, and they all focus on that. It's just
Yes.
they only see the material aspect, and they don't see the unseen energies and the silent energetic quality of the space.
We should
So-
say for Juan is helping us reinvent architecture curriculum in general, and Isis Medrick's daughter, who Juan welcomed there in biology, is at the university helping to reinvent architecture curriculum now. We have Professor Ralph. Here's a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, first, thank you for your work. That's absolutely great. There is some
Thank you.
there is some new challenges coming up, because we have all these metal buildings now, rebar buildings. You could do them with carbon fiber instead. What is done partly, but that would be a way forward. Like we now have wind energy put out everywhere. They cut down forests
Yeah.
and put wind energy devices, and this is destruction of the energetics in the region.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, very efficiently so. So that's something where we
Right.
need to look at
Yeah.
and find ways to counter that with nice buildings, with having an idea how to make the energy flows deal with the stuff, even make use of this nonsense to like empower the region, and we have to get more trees. Regions without trees get no rain anymore.
That's right.
And so that's something where
Yeah.
Exactly.
that needs to go together.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
And the metal wind farm is a nightmare. Comment, Juan, go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, I mean, just to comment to that, like definitely the type of rebar that you use is fundamental, and one of the most simple ways to build structures that are much more biologically architect and more beneficial for its inhabitants, for the people who live in these spaces. This particular structure, the central dome, is being done with fiberglass rebar.
Yeah.
We wanted to use
Nice.
basalt rebar, but we end up having to compromise with the building regulations. But in any scenario, the whole dome is done with basalt, with fiberglass rebar.
So they're coming.
So that's a very simple
Go ahead.
concept that a lot of people could implement. I mean, not talking about the different shapes, but I mean, just to also elaborate there, like you're saying, there is all these structures that are built these days, and they're actually like, I mean, they in a way, what they're doing is disrupting the natural energetic flows of the earth. So they are not taking into account the geomancy whatsoever. And then they just plant them in places which they shouldn't be, and then they build with materials that are not optimal. So in a way, they destroying the bioenergetic landscape of the environment, and that actually reduces fertility. On the other hand, we can build structures which are regenerative. They actually will have the ability to create a field effect that will be regenerative upon its environment. And
Negentropic.
this is actually negentropic. This is something that Philip Callahan has proven, like the Irish towers, they're actually doing that.
Yeah.
So this is an ancient knowledge.
Yeah.
It's something that was understood by the ancients. They were creating buildings that were built on the geomagnetic nodes and these power spots, if you will. And they have this regenerative effect. So we just have to rediscover this, and we have to apply it and realize that what we're doing in our time is actually the entire opposite.
Yeah. The Irish towers were actually tunable. They changed the dirt level and they set it to about 1,000 hertz, profoundly pain reducing for childbirth, for example. These were tunable for specific functions. Speaking of temple, that's Callahan. Sorry, Juan. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, that was pretty much what what I wanted to share. Like we should reinvent architecture.
Yep. Exactly.
And I think even this field of Vastu science, like they talk about this. I mean, they're talking about buildings creating
Life force.
field effects, which are, and then so this is an ancient knowledge, and then so it all comes to architecture is like music. It's actually frozen music. So it has to have harmony. Like Le Corbusier, for example, he was using these principles. He was creating, even if it was a square room, he will make sure that the width of the modes of resonance of that room will at least be harmonic.
Yes.
So when you step into that room, you will feel good.
Nice.
And so they were squares, but the idea is that in modern architecture, all these things they have been totally ignored. So none of these principles are used any longer.
That's the problem. Yep.
And yeah, I think we should reinvent and rediscover this stuff and bring it to a whole another new level. Like
cheers to that. Absolutely, Juan. Absolutely. I think we just do one or two last questions if we make it brief. Yeah, go ahead.
I had an idea of, couldn't we use
Speak loud.
Couldn't we use the wind force, which is already built, the wind force,
the windmills,
the windmills,
the wind generator.
Couldn't we use them like for gathering the atmospheric energy and try to harmonize the field?
Well, the problem, the wind generators are almost always the worst dielectric possible.
Yeah,
they're fractionating the air and killing the birds. And
so we couldn't use it as
steel and aluminum.
some sort of metal wire.
better ways to do it.
To
Yeah.
pull down some
Because remember, you need to enhance the distribution efficiency of the array. There's almost no way to do that with a metal tower. I don't
You
think
can even harmonize these fields that are so horrible.
Yeah.
So we are not like helpless.
Yeah.
But we must grow with the task.
Grow the field, yes, yes, yes. One more question, was there? Yeah?
I was going to ask, the material for the pedals, is that precast concrete?
The material for the petals in the lotus, Juan?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually had to compromise. I was against using so there is an actual metal frame here.
Yeah, that's what I.
And then there is a fiberglass fabric that then is rendered with concrete and then is coated with stone powder. So that's the best we could do because these pedals are. Well, we could have done that in fiberglass or and a T-beam or I-beam of fiberglass casted, but it was too expensive. Or basalt composite material using fibers and resins that's also very, very durable. But sometimes we face like, I mean, this is the same thing. If the industry and people start to realize these things, then maybe these forms of manufacture become more inexpensive.
Yes.
But then all the resources are put into creating structures with steel. So
thank you. Your questioner is an architect. Last
Yeah,
question.
I was going to say, can you use glue-lam beams instead of steel to give you that kind of strength?
Glue laminated beams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, cross-laminated or
Yeah.
that kind of, yeah. Those are materials I'm using here in Bali for some of our structures. Very, very,
So you
very
find
powerful,
them
very
dialectically
good solution
Yeah.
for,
Oh, the wood.
for
most-
creating very complex structural designs.
And the closer the grain structure, the better the dielectric of the wood. You guys should communicate.
Yeah, we will, definitely.
Bioarchitects.net and bioarc.com, right?
Bioarc.co.
Bioarc.co, C-O, for Juan
CO,
Schlosser.
Bioarc CO.
He's a real world leader in this. We thank you, Juan. That was fabulous. Last question.
And he may not be able to answer it, but the hemp bricks
Hemp
in
brick.
England, were those, because a lot of clay is aluminum.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if he knows the composition of the hemp bricks.
The hemp bricks, sometimes from UK. The hemp is a fabulous dielectric for what's in the brick. And we even found that that was in Prague, low temperature fired bricks are better dielectric than high temperature, which the ancients already knew. Comment, Juan? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like when it comes down to creating materials, like there is so many things that you could do. You can create, especially with composite materials, where you start to add fibers and basalt fibers, and then different types of materials that potentially will have a very high dielectric. I mean, Dan always says, like, you take that material, you sandwich it in between two plates, and then you calculate the dielectric constant of the material.
Which is charge
So then you
distribution efficiency. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so once you know the definition of success, then you can invent the material, which is charge distribution.
Just when the grounding, he does something special or just with the ground part
Grounding part of that building, for example?
of buildings?
Yeah. Do you use a grounding system special, or?
This beneath every petal there will be a grounding rod.
I see.
So it's connected to the earth and grounded in a major way. And then so that electrical negative terminal basically is connected to the center of the dome.
A grounding rod.
In our past lecture, Dan, we actually elaborate this. If anybody would like to watch, you can see like we actually speak about projects specifically. And you can see how these structures were designed and built. So there is more information that you could find out.
Thank you.
Are they using special lengths or coils for the grounding rods?
Like
to clunk or something?
Special length. Well, the grounding rod position, you measure the ohms when you're done. Special length for grounding rod, I don't think so, not yet. But you could tune them theoretically also, I suppose.
Kind of like a fork?
Yeah.
Last question.
Well, I mean, I like to comment to that, Dan. There is actually, if anybody like to look at the Brill Compendium, there is the Brill Compendium. There is plenty of patents for grounding rods and also lightning rods and
Yes.
lots of things that actually could be used for biological architecture. Where you really start to get into even adding like mica capacitors and certain electronic components that could enhance these properties. So there's a lot of experimentation to be done, but definitely there's a lot of
Nice.
clues in the Brill Compendium.
Well, see, there they spelled it VIRIL, although it's often also spelled VRIL without two I's. But Vril being a name for longitudinal propagation, we think. Iris, Lasty.
Yeah. In the Netherlands, there's a company that makes water-fight devices and uses shell lime with amazing healing.
Oh, shell lime would be fabulous.
Is that also a material?
Lime powder. Lime powder and shell, these are wonderful things. In fact, seashells is how Callahan started, actually.
Could you make like concrete out of it?
Well, if you get the right, yes. And again, you measure success with dielectric. Yes, absolutely. Well, I think we need to let these wonderful folks go to lunch, and we need to thank Juan. Let's give Juan a big hand. Thank you, Juan. Juan, you're really a hero. Thank you.